I didn't really take running seriously until my sophomore year of high school. I'd run track before that, but I didn't really take it that serious. And I joined the cross-country team that year halfway through the season. And so I didn't have very much time to prepare for that first race. I think I only had a week of practice, and then I was thrown into that first race. And I remember the feeling after finishing that first race. I finished aggressively mid-pack, and I remember thinking, I don't remember my exact time, but I remember thinking running sub 7-minute miles for a 5K is literally impossible, let alone the pace that the varsity guys were running. Well, fast forward to my senior year, and I'm running on the varsity team that would end out winning the state championship that year, running times that I had previously thought to be literally impossible. And so what changed? It was a shift in perspective and a shift in interpretation. Think back to your latest race, let's hope it was a marathon, and we'll say at mile 20 of that marathon, your legs are on fire, everything hurts. That is the information that you receive. You can take that information and you can say you're out of gas, it's time to quit. Or you can interpret it as, this is the cost of running my goal pace. I've done this before and I know I can hold it. In life, we also get information that we perceive and then interpret. Let's say you text your partner and they don't text back for 3 hours. You can either interpret that information as they're ignoring you, or you could interpret it as they are swamped at work. Same information in both of those scenarios, yet both interpretations take you to completely different emotional worlds, two completely different realities. I recently came across this idea that sparked this entire thought process, and it was the idea that our reality is just our perception. And our shared reality in society, or societal reality, is just perception plus agreement. And I think there's a vital tweak that we need to make, and that's that interpretation plays a big role in that. See, we understand what gravity does. We understand that it's a force that keeps us here on Earth and keeps the moon in orbit, keeps us in orbit around the sun, but we still don't really know what gravity is. We just know what it does. And so we have a shared interpretation of the perception of gravity, even though we don't really know what it is by definition. And so what I'm trying to say is that our reality is just sensory data that is perceived and then interpreted. To bring this into a metaphor, we're all on our own boat in the river of life. And perception is noticing the river, noticing the current, the rapids, all of that. That is perception. Interpretation is the rudder of the boat that we're in. We cannot deny the current and the rapids or the existence of the river, but we can steer the boat. And that's what interpretation is. We can change the direction that we're headed. Taking that to the societal level, societal reality is perception plus agreement. Some of the most powerful interpretations aren't individual, they are collective. A shared interpretation of our perception becomes contagious, spreading through shared language, rituals, and stories, until what once seemed impossible becomes inevitable. Take a second to think about how powerful that really is. And we have examples of how this has played out in history. On the negative side, this manifests as racism and xenophobia. On the positive side, this is how women's rights transformed from something impossible to something that became inevitable. This happens on a societal level. It also happens on an individual level, this agreement idea. If you agree with the interpretation of who you are with your past self, if your current self agrees with your past self, then you will continue down the path you're on to become the person that you say you're going to become. or that you're practicing that you will become. Because your actions speak louder than your words. But what I'm trying to say is that a hardship that happens in your life can send you down the path of isolation and depression, or it can be the catalyst that sends you down the path of becoming the resilient person that you could be. It all depends on agreement of interpretation. The wisdom traditions all have something to say on this idea, and they all come at it with different lenses. Christianity has Paul teaching us that every trial or tribulation that we go through can be a refiner's fire. In Buddhism, pain is inevitable. Suffering, or dukkha, is optional. And it all depends on whether we're clinging or resisting, and that comes down to our interpretation of reality. I pulled a lot of my understanding of this entire concept from Taoism, actually, including the river metaphor. In Taoism, the steering the rudder, as I mentioned, is very much like Wu Wei, which is effortless action or action without attachment. I personally love the Stoic take on this. Epictetus said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them," which aligns perfectly with this idea of interpretation. But Stoicism stresses objectivity. It's not about choosing the most blissful interpretation or the most helpful interpretation. It's about aligning your interpretation with reason, with nature, and with virtue. And I think attempting to find objectivity here is absolutely vital, because I think even in just the effort alone, we're avoiding some of the major pitfalls that come from many of these wisdom practices when they're done incorrectly, because it can result in spiritual bypassing. The delusion of denying that the river that we're in even exists. It looks like toxic positivity. It looks like denying that sometimes things just happen to us and it's not always going to be a good thing. And because of all of that, I think it's important for us to surround ourselves with people that help us question our perceptions and our interpretations of those perceptions. So we can ask ourselves questions like, what gaps in understanding am I feeling right now with assumptions? And am I rushing to interpret this because uncertainty is just uncomfortable? And is this interpretation that I am using right now helping me feel superior, victimized, or helpless in a way that feels safe or familiar? I think what we need to be looking for are interpretations that would be both honest about something close to objective reality and at the same time open for the most possibilities of Wu Wei-like action. Action that is effortless, or action that is without attachment to an outcome. An additional layer of complexity is that with the most transformative interpretations that we will have, they're going to require us to act before we fully actually believe in them. I didn't wake up one day believing that I could run varsity times when I was in high school and then just went out and did it. I had to train with curiosity. I had to train wondering if it was actually possible. I had to train acting as if I could run varsity times while carrying the doubt of whether or not it was actually possible. Once again, I am not an expert in any of this. This is me just thinking out loud. However, I do think that there is value in this thought experiment, if you want to call it that, because if we can come to see just how much our perception and our interpretation of our perception affects the way we experience reality, then I think we will become less rigid, that we will question our own certainty before we weaponize it. And ultimately, I hope that we will come to realize that our limits are much less out there than they are in here. And that all of this unconscious interpretation, unconscious stuff that happens inside us, that we can bring it more to the forefront and wake up a little bit more to what's happening. So anyways, I really hope this was interesting or thought-provoking. And if it was, I hope you'll stick around and I'll catch you in the next video. All right, gear for today. And as a reminder, I am not affiliated with any brands at all. This is me just sharing the gear I run in for fun, if you're interested. Craft trail running hat, Torege, I think, sunglasses, Solomon running shirt, Apple Watch Ultra, Solomon running shorts, Stance running socks, Mafate X, Hoka Mafate X running shoes. I got those together with the Mafate 5s. I'm going to do a comparison. If you have any gear questions, if you have any questions on the gear, let me know.